Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Everybody had a good first session, I hope. Yeah? Yay, woo! Good lunch? Yeah, I guess, right. First segment. Good lunch? Yes? Wonderful. So we have the honor of having Melissa Naasko here. I'm going to go ahead. Yay! I'm just going to read her bio, but... Right, claps? No. So Melissa Naasko, she's going to be talking about taking your spiritual medicine. It is a rite of adulthood to make sure that you are prepared for the trials of life. This extends into our spiritual lives as well. It is...
She's out of breath.
I know, sorry, forgive me.
She's doing this because she's amazing.
So nervous. No, I'm just kidding. It is no longer your parents', grandparents, or godparents' responsibility to create a shoebox that keeps your medicines and tools in. It is now yours. As young adults, you need to check your spiritual medicine toolboxes and make sure that they are stocked up before you need them. If you wait until you are already in trouble, it is a lot harder to get help and medicine you need. So, what kind of things do you need to store in your spiritual medicine toolboxes? This is what we're going to be talking about today. Elizabeth Naasko is a wife of a deacon attached to the Breakout monastery. Mm-hmm. He's actually going to be ordained as a priest soon, which was kind of a sudden thing.
So pray for us.
Which is awesome, though. And they have 11 children together. Yeah. And a hobby farm. And they raise their own meat and dairy. And Melissa... Yes, and big excitement. Melissa writes and speaks on Orthodox fasting and parenting, and is the author of Fasting as a Family, which is published by Ancient Faith. And she has 2 upcoming books, including a personal memoir.
Yes.
On moving to the farm, and that's entitled Coming to Idle Farm.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, without further ado, take it away.
I am so glad to see all of you guys. So I also have to tell you that I'm also really glad to see the number of people who are wearing jeans, because I'm wearing my jeans. But they're my dress jeans, because I live in the country, so you have like your dress jeans and then like your normal jeans. These are my dress jeans. And so, like Mary talked about, I live on a farm and we have like a scant dozen kids, and we're basically subsistence farmers. So like I have this like thermometer of clothes that I wear. So like the bottom rung of my thermometer are like the barn clothes. And those are the clothes that can only be worn to the barn because nobody wants to look at them or smell them, right? And then like a step up from that, these are the clothes that I would wear to Walmart. But a Walmart in the country, and that's like not a good level, but that's like farm, Walmart. And then above that, I have like clothes I would wear to like dinner with my husband. Again, like when we drive, we have to go 24 miles to a town of 8,000. So like that's like a level. And then I have like church. And so right now I'm like somewhere between funeral at the church and dinner with my husband. And so like I go places and I think like, I'm looking all high dollar. And then I walk in and I'm like, no, I am a hillbilly. These people have like clothes. That's okay. So we're gonna pretend that it doesn't matter. So, all right, so I wanna start by telling you about, I like to talk in terms of stories. So I wanna tell you about a time when I really realized that I had done a really bad job of getting my spiritual medicine kit together, my shoebox. So when I was newly married, my husband and I lived in an off-campus apartment, and we got the flu, like flu, influenza flu, sick as a dog. I'm making out my will on this piece of notebook paper. You get all my Beatles albums, flu. And I got up and I went to the kitchen and I opened the cupboard where we keep all the plates. And I grabbed the shoebox that's there. And I grabbed this because my mom had always kept a shoebox of over-the-counter medicine in the cabinet next to the plates. And so I was like newly married, I was figuring out things, so I kept things right where my mother kept them. So I went, I opened the cupboard, I pulled down the shoebox. And in my shoebox I have nail polish remover, Tums, and Neosporin. That's it. And I was so unprepared to be so terribly sick. And like, spoiler alert, we survived. I made it to Walgreens, right? But I was better than my husband. He was like, he had 104-degree temperature to this day. We talk about, like, remember when he had the flu? Like, that was really bad, right? And we didn't want to call our parents because, like, we were being grown-ups. And so we took care of ourselves. But we did it really, really badly. So, you know, I reflect on this now, that there comes a point in your time, like in your life, when it's no longer your parents or your godparents or your grandparents' job to do things for you. You have to fill that shoebox in your cupboard, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. Your mom shouldn't have to come along and open it and be like, hey, you guys should probably have some Tylenol for the first time somebody gets 104-degree temperature, and no one's going to do that for you, and that's okay. This is the time in our lives when we do this. So we have to think about not just having our shoebox in the cupboard that has like Tylenol in it and whatever we might need, but we want to have our spiritual shoebox. We can have the things that we need to put in that shoebox to take care of our spiritual lives. And it's just as important as the things that you keep for your physical life. So we're going to talk about it in terms of things that you need to put in your shoebox, things that are important for your well-being, and we're going to talk about why they're important and what things they do for us, okay? So if you think about it, anytime you hear people talk about getting ready for a fast or when they need to approach something prayerfully, they'll tell you need 3 things. They'll say prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So we're going to talk about those standard things of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Pretty normal things, but a lot of times we don't think about it. So sometimes it's important just to kind of like dive into those things and think about what they are. Okay? And we're going to take each one of those things, we're going to talk about what they are, and then we're going to put them in our shoebox, okay? So I want to start by telling you about prayer, fasting, almsgiving. We're going to talk about prayer. I kind of struggle with prayer myself. I'm going to be honest. I'm a type A personality, and I live on a farm. So I get up in the morning, and we're clicking along. We milk cows. I'm not I am literally hillbilly. So we're milking cows in the morning. And so I never miss evening prayer. I love evening prayer. I love closing out the day this way. I like getting my kids together. That could be a really long part of the evening, and I love it. Morning prayer is always really hard for me because I want to get up, I want to get going. I'm thinking about, I got to get a cup of coffee, I've got to do this other thing. And I don't feel that buzz that morning prayer should give me, like a cup of coffee, in the way that the saints talk about it, they miss it, they can't get by without it. And so I have to think about, okay, why is it that I don't get this? Well, the saints are holier than I am, and they're better runners in this race. When you talk about the Christian journey as being like a race, they're better runners in this race. And how do we become better runners in this race? Well, it makes me think about a neighbor that we had when I was a little kid, and he died several years ago, outliving his wife, outliving his sister and 2 of her 3 kids. And so we kind of stepped in for him. Now, Ward, when I was probably 10 years old, he got colon cancer. And at this point, he was 82 years old. And we're like, well, that's it. When you're 82 and you get colon cancer, you're going to go. And he was fading. But then he was also listening to a lot of talk radio because he was sick. And he heard a person on talk radio talking about becoming a power walker. So this 82-year-old man with an oxygen tank and a colon cancer diagnosis told me, he's like, I'm going to become a power walker. I'm like, okay, that's not a natural goal for somebody in your shape, but whatever, that's okay. I was kind of I don't know, maybe he can. But he did. So what he did is he started out walking to and from his front door to his mailbox twice a day. That's all he did. He walked to and from. Waited a couple hours, to and from. Well, in a year, I kid you not, he moved up to 3 miles a day, was off oxygen, and was cancer-free. Right, so I think about that, and I'm not a super athletic kind of runner, but I think about this all the time when I think, I don't have time to do this, or I'm not athletically equipped in this way. Well, if an 82-year-old man with a colon cancer diagnosis carries his oxygen machine to his mailbox twice a day, I can pretty much do anything, right? I can do this. And this reminds me a lot of my prayer life. So I may not be the best runner right now. I may not be very good at running this race, but I can start small. I can start walking to and from my mailbox every day. Because it's not just about the occasional practice. I mean, marathon runners don't become marathon runners because they wake up on a Saturday and today I'm going to run a marathon. And it's going to be great, guys. And no, they start small. You have to build up towards these things, and it's a consistency of habit. Good runners become good runners because they keep up on it. Ward became a good athlete in the best way he could by being really consistent, starting small, moving through it, doing it every single day. And we need to approach prayer, and I need to approach prayer in the same kind of way, starting small and being really consistent in it. And it can be really hard, because if you think about it, if you pray now for whatever kind of anxieties you have or any needs that you have, in 5 minutes you think about it, maybe even a little bit better. It maybe not. So we kind of look at that distance between beginning and ending our prayer as being the whole sum of our journey. That everything that we do in this moment, and I don't see a lot of payoff here, we might tell ourselves next time, you know what? It's not really that big a deal. But it is. It is actually a big deal because all those little moments added up are really the sum of our journey. It's not the beginning of this prayer to the end of this prayer. It's the beginning of this prayer through all these other prayers, the consistency of daily habit that get us where we want to go. And that's how we become good runners. We start running in small bits, and we need to start praying in small bits. So when we have this feeling like, well, things aren't going really well right now, I'm not in the place I want to be, I want you to remember Ward. I want you to think about this 82-year-old man with a colon cancer diagnosis walking with this oxygen cart. And if he can do that, you can start the small daily habit. And if you forget one day, we have to remember that it's not the beginning of this prayer to the end of this prayer. It's the sum total of all our prayerful moments. So if you don't pray this morning because you forgot, you got busy, you were, looking at Facebook, because we all do that. We get up in the morning, we're like, we do this. But we can go ahead and convert these things into prayerful moments. And it's a habit like any other. And I'm going to tell you, I am really bad at developing habits. I have all sorts of habits that are bad habits, but the good habits are harder ones to develop. So I'm going to talk about a time I developed a helpful habit and why I had to develop this habit. Okay? So when my kids were little, my mother-in-law was visiting my sister-in-law, and so I went over to her house to take care of her dog. He could go in and out through a dog gate, but he needed to be checked in regularly, and so there's some activity. So we go over to my mother-in-law's house. I bring my slew of screaming children. I put them in the yard and let them play, and I'm in the house, and I think I was watering plants or something. Well, my kids had an argument in the backyard, so I come out, and I go out through the back door, which is the security gate, and as soon as I got out on the porch, I heard it bang, slam behind me, and it locked. So I was out there with no shoes, no phone, no purse, no keys, and a bunch of screaming children. So I had to plead with my 4-year-old to go through the dog gate for a Pomeranian, into this house and let me in. So I'm pleading with him, and he's still he's the squirreliest kid I have. He's so difficult. But I get him to go inside, and so once he's inside, he's like, yay, I'm inside. I'm like, okay, now you can open the door. And he looked right in my eyes, and he walked off. He got a chair, and he scooted it up to the refrigerator, got on top of the refrigerator, and got a Costco-sized container of turtles, and sat there and ate them while I watched him. So I'm watching him eat these. And I can't yell at him because I'm going to kill you. He's not going to open the door to be killed by his mom. He's not going to do it. I'm like, those are so good. Do you want to share those? Come on, let's open the door. Open the door right now. Because it's 10 in the morning and your dad's at work. Can you open the door for me? Well, eventually he got thirsty and he couldn't get the tap to work, so he let me in. But it was a really good run. It's I have to be better about not letting, locking myself out of my mother-in-law's house, because she's old. She's got one of the security gates. But the way I did it was I got a carabiner, like a rock climbing carabiner, and I put it on my pants. And so I've got this habit. So, Jack was 4 then. He's going to be 15 next weekend. And I've got this habit. But I think about it, we talk about prayer beginning from one moment to the next, but it's really all those little moments in between. Learning the habit of not locking myself out of my mom's house started with just wow, this is terrible. I don't want to do this again. And it would have been a lot easier if I'd already had this habit to begin with, this good habit of keeping my keys on me. And the thing is that, let me tell you, it's not the first time that I wish I wish that I'd been better about checking in the door, putting my keys in my pocket. I mean, one of my kids locked me out of the van one time. I could throw the keys on the seat, and he's like, goodbye. But kids do things like that because it's fun. But, they do things I'm sure all of you looking back I remember doing something like that. I know you guys did it. I can see on your faces. But I would have saved myself an enormous amount of trouble if I'd already developed this habit of putting my keys in my pocket. And it didn't take just that one time of watching Jack stuff his face full of turtles. It took many times. But now, 10 years later, I look at myself and I remember my keys. I'm very good about checking out that I have my keys. How much misery could I have saved myself if I developed that habit earlier? All the time that I got locked out of my van by a petulant 8-year-old girl. It's I'm sorry. I could have saved myself all that trouble. And that's the thing with prayer. We don't realize once we develop the habit, all the little times that we've saved ourselves trouble. You're not going to know it. You just have to trust that it's there. So that once you've got your habit going and it's going really well, you have to keep on it. You have to stay with it. because you're not going to get a moment where like the skies part and clouds open and light shines down on you and an angel says, yay, you didn't get locked out of your house today. You're not going to have that moment. You just have to trust that it's there. I mean, like sometimes you're like, wow, that was really close. Good thing it's right here. But that's the thing, is that you develop these habits to save yourself the heartache, even when you don't see the heartache. Our prayers is something that starts in the beginning, and it goes until the day that we die, and it's the sum total of all our prayerful moments. And all the opportunities you have to save yourself pain and suffering are there. Even if you don't see them, your prayer is still benefiting you, just like having my keys in my pocket so that kids can't lock me out of my mother-in-law's house. So I want each and every one of you to think about prayer in this way, and to go ahead and put this in your spiritual medicine shoebox and think about it, that I'm going to start praying every day. And even if you mess up, that's okay, because tomorrow is still going to happen. You're still going to wake up tomorrow and have another opportunity to do this all over again. And it's not that you're failing. It's not that you should stop now. God is going to give you this sunset and the sunrise to start over again. So you have to think about prayer as being something that starts at the beginning and continues through to the end of your life and is all these prayerful moments, and it's going to save you so much heartache. And every time that you forget, every time that you drop this ball, God's going to give you another opportunity. He gives us that chance to think about everything that we're doing. It's one of the great things is that we continue to have these wonderful opportunities God gives us. Okay, so we talked about the 3 things that you need to keep in your medicine, spiritual medicine box, right? We talked about prayer, fasting, almsgiving. So now let's go on to fasting. Now I talk about fasting a lot. I have 11 kids. I go to places. I usually talk to moms who are like, hey, my kids hate lentils, help me. So it's true. It actually happens a lot. People are like, what happens when your kids hate what you eat? It happens a lot. But fasting is about so much more than whether or not your kids like lentils and whether or not you really feel like eating food today. You know, it's this beautiful opportunity that we have to become closer to God. And when we forget that it's actually a beautiful thing. And I want to impress on you just what a beautiful thing it is. Because I go places and I talk about fasting, and like people are expecting me to come in with like the rudder and like smack them. Like, do this! I'm not going to do that. Because I think fasting is a beautiful thing. And if I hassle you, you're going to remember how much I hassled you more than you remember how beautiful this thing is. So I want you to feel compelled to turn towards this beautiful way of being prayer. So fasting isn't hard. It's not physically hard. You're not going to become so overcome by weakness when you fast by having an almond milk latte twice a week that you can't crawl out of bed and make it through your life. Fasting is psychologically difficult, and that's the big hurdle that we have to get over. It's that we know that going and making a different order every week is a harder thing to do. Not because it's harder to drink it, it's just harder to go ahead and commit to this idea of fasting. And the reason I think that it is because, well, like, let's take this coffee, for example. You go, you order your cup of coffee, and, you know, tell them what you want in it. You can say whole milk, you could say half and half, you could say whatever, but you're gonna have to say almond milk. And you know what, it feels wrong, because you freaking deserve that coffee because you got out of bed and are dealing with stupid people like a lot. And I'm pretty sure that this half and half in this moment's gonna feel so much better than the almond milk because those people are really stupid. You deserve this, right? Well, it feels like that. Like, I know it feels like that. Because, like, I know that when I wake up on Wednesday morning, I'm like, ah, because we have a cow. I have, like, an unlimited supply of half and half. Like, it's right there. When I have to, like, go around it and get the almond milk, it's like, And it's, you know, because it's psychologically difficult, right? But what we have to do is we have to remember that in the end, fasting isn't about what you put into your body or what you put into your mouth or what you don't put into your mouth. So think about this. Demons are perfect fasters. They're perfect fasters. They're technically perfect fasters. They eat nothing. They never eat anything that's not Lenten. We don't fast to become like demons. We fast to become like Christ. And that's the thing that we have to remember, because it is a little bit about what you put in your mouth, but it's not really about what you're putting in your mouth in those moments. It's about what you're putting into your mind and what you're putting into your heart. All those little opportunities to say, you know what, I'm going to reach around this half and half and I'm going to get that almond milker. I'm going to go ahead and order this thing other than that really, really, really yummy pepperoni pizza or whatever. Every time that you do this, you're turning more and more towards God, and that's our whole goal. Our whole goal is theosis. Our whole goal is to find ourselves transparent to the will of God so that we can see God shining in all the moments of our lives. And we do that by stripping away the layers of self and turning more and more towards God. When you put a plant in the window, it turns towards the sun. It doesn't like instantly turn, that would actually be really cool though, like instantly turn towards the sun. And we don't do that either, but we do it in little moments where we gradually turn towards God in these tiny little moments. So in that way, it is really important what you put in your coffee. It's really important what you order when you're at lunch with your friends. And because we turn towards God in each one of these moments, we have to remember that I am fasting not so that I can deprive myself of eggs or cheese or meat. I am fasting so I can feed myself with other things. Every time you choose to turn towards God and to deny yourself in these tiny little itty bitty ways, these are really little martyrdoms. No one's putting you in the Colosseum to be like chased by a wild beast. It's a tiny thing to go to Starbucks and like, yeah, can I get soy milk? Or yeah, can I get almond milk? It's a tiny little opportunity to turn towards God. But in the end, it's really effective. Because in the end, fasting is not as much about what you put into your mouth as what you put into your heart. And so God does care. God does care about these things that we're doing. God does care that we do it. But it's not because fasting is fundamentally about eating. Fasting is fundamentally about feeding. What are you feeding yourself in every moment when you make a decision about what you are or what you're not going to eat? So, fasting is a difficult thing. We know the rules are out there. We know what those rules look like. But it's really hard to follow those rules. It's especially hard to follow those rules because each one of you, every time you go out to eat on a Friday and you're with your Orthodox friends, you look at what they're eating. You can't help it. It's really, really hard to look at what they're eating. But I need you to think about fasting as medicine. Think about what they're eating as a prescription. And you know what? Nobody owes you that information. They don't have to tell you what's wrong with them. They don't have to tell you what their prescription from their doctor is. You don't owe that information to them, and they don't owe it to you. If they feel like telling you, that's fine. But it is not your business. Fasting is medicine, and it's only appropriate for you when it's the appropriate medicine given at the appropriate times. So this is where the pharmacists are going to freak out. So, no, they're legitimately going to freak out. So I used to take care, yeah, I was thinking about this. I was like, I'm going to get it to this moment, and they're going to have all these wheels turning in their head. And be like, no. So here's the thing. I used to take care of an elderly, developmentally disabled man. He lived in a group home, and he used to come to our church. And I used to do his grocery shopping and take him to like go get his hair cut and things like that. One time he had this terrible injury. He was hit by a car, broke a leg, developed a blood clot in his lung, which is a really big deal. So he had to be on blood thinners. When you're illiterate and function at like a 5 or 6 year old level, being on blood thinners is a really scary thing. So I had to get one of those like daily medicine sorters to put all of his medicine in. And I would take him to the doctor and go get his blood level, because you have to be in this certain zone because it's too little and you can not dissolve your clot or maybe get more and too much, you bleed into your brain and die. So it's like, it's a really important thing to stay in this narrow zone, right? So, and he couldn't read, so it had to be me. So William. I have another Marvin. This is William. So William needed me to keep him in this zone. So I would do all his food shopping. So he needed to eat what I gave him. Well, there was a time I took him in to go get his blood level tested. It's called an INR. And he was totally non-therapeutic. He was like not doing any good at all. And so we were talking like, did you take your medicine? What are you doing? And so I finally said, what are you eating? So for about a week, he'd been watching the Lonesome Dove series on videotape with a neighbor. And they were eating broccoli and spinach dip. So he had completely undone all of his medication. Now, broccoli and spinach, they're really good, and they're really good for you, but not when you're on blood thinners. It's really, really bad. So the pharmacist is like, I know what's going on. So we go. They talk about what they're going to do. They give me his dosage for the next 5 days. We're going to do this. We're going to come back. We're going to kind of like go back and forth until we get him in a happy zone, adjusting his medicine as we go. So I go set out 5 days worth of medicine for him. I think this is pretty good. The next morning I get this call, he's got a bloody nose that won't stop. So, no, it's worse. When I got there, I found out that he'd taken 5 days worth of medication at one fell swoop. So which is like really bad. So like, oh my gosh, you could die right now, honey. So I take him to the hospital, and he had to be hospitalized for a while. He's okay. I want you guys to all know he's okay. He's like in a more supervised living center now, so he's okay. But he could have died. And it was horrible because his thing is like, well, if a little bit of medicine is good, then a lot of medicine is better. Bingo, exactly. It's exactly what he said. A lot of medicine is better. So I'm going to take all this medicine. I'm going to be so good, guys. Right. Well, here's the thing. Fasting is medicine, right? So spinach, broccoli, healthy foods like that, these are really, really, really good things, unless they're not. And, a little bit more blood thinner medication is really, really, really good. Well, unless it's not. Just like all this medication that he was taking, fasting is medicine. You have to take the right amounts in the right way at the right times, or it's not going to do you good. And taking the wrong medicine, even if you feel like you're being more pious, isn't going to help you. You're not going to be better. You're not going to turn more towards God because you're not feeding yourself on God and holiness. You're feeding yourself on pride. And that's not what fasting is about. So when we fast, it's important that we turn towards our spiritual physician, we turn towards our confessor, and we talk about it. When you go to the doctor, you don't just come in and like, guess what's wrong with me? Do you know? Can you see it? Take a guess. That's not going to help. You're like, I don't know. You have to talk to me. So we approach our spiritual physician the same way. We don't walk in and like, can you guess what's wrong with me? Just guess. Can you see it? No, it doesn't work that way. We have to work cooperatively with our doctor, and we have to work cooperatively with our confessor. We have to talk to them about what's going on. They have to know what our symptoms are. They have to see our wounds. They have to know what needs to be healed. And they have to know how the medicine is working in our body. They have to know how we're progressing. So fasting, as a medicine, you do this in cooperation with your spiritual father. I'm nobody's spiritual father. I'm not going to tell anybody how to fast. You talk to your spiritual father, and you work on this plan. You work on your treatment plan. So I want you to think about all the things I said about fasting before. I want you to think about William and his spinach and broccoli dip and his warfarin. And I also want you to think about how important it is to go see your spiritual father, right? That this is this important balance, that we work cooperatively together, that we work constantly. Here's another thing. When you go to the doctor, like a physical doctor, sometimes the things that happen hurt. Sometimes our doctor has to reveal wounds. Sometimes we need surgery. Let me tell you something, surgery is not fun. Nobody says, you know what, I want you to cut a hole in my body and then sew it back up later. That feels so great. Nobody wants that. But sometimes it's really important. And the same thing happens, so you're over there, somebody's thinking about something, I know what she's talking about. The same thing happens in confession. You're gonna have to uncover spiritual things. Your physician is gonna have to open up things that you really would rather them not open up. It's not fun. It doesn't feel good. Confession is intrinsically tied to fasting in this way because fasting and confession are all about what we're feeding ourselves. We feed ourselves on the holiness of God so that we can turn more and more and more towards Him. Because when we don't turn towards Him, we turn towards ourselves. And when you go to confession, you need to think about the fact that sometimes your confessor is going to have to uncover uncomfortable things. But this is good. This is the way it's supposed to be. Your confessor needs to uncover these things so they can be washed and given medicine. So you can feed yourself this medicine. So you can feed yourself on the holiness of God so that you become healthier. It's really difficult to think about confession and fasting and food because our physical eyes are really good at looking at the body. You can look at somebody and be like, well, you look tired. I can see that you're tired. Or I can see that you've lost a lot of weight recently, or maybe you've got, like we were talking earlier about, like the physical things you can see, like I have a rash. Can you see it? We can see these kinds of things. But our physical eyes are so much more attuned in most cases than our spiritual eyes. We don't look at somebody and go like, oh my gosh, she's got some issues. Like it's not as obvious. Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, sometimes it is. You look at people like, wow, they need Jesus. But it does happen that we're not as attuned to it, okay? So while it's easier to think about, well, I need to go to the doctor, I need to take my physical medicine, I need to get checked out, sometimes it's harder to be honest with ourselves about the ways in which our spiritual illness has developed, that we need to constantly be on guard. The reason we go to confession all the time isn't because it's fun. We go to confession because we know that we need medicine. We know that we need to be healed. Even when we don't see it necessarily, we know that we need to be healed. And we see this in our physical lives. We have to remember that one of the beautiful things that God gives us are these little clues about our spiritual life that are found in our physical life. There's these physical aspects of our lives that we can touch and see and hear and taste. And God allows us to think about those things in terms of our physicalness because we have those same spiritual needs. We need to touch, see, feel, taste spiritual things as well. So what I want you to put into your spiritual shoebox right now is I want you to put fasting, and the complement to that, of course, is confession. You've got to go to confession regularly. You're going to be eating the right things, right? We're going to put fasting and confession into our spiritual shoebox so that we have that available for us before we get too sick. Because let me tell you, you can hear a cough, you can feel a fever, you can see that someone has, say, like the flu that's so bad that makes you write out a will on notebook paper. You can see this. And it's a lot harder to go and get help when you're already so sick. So if you put these things in your spiritual shoebox now, you'll have it available before you get sick. Here's the thing. Christianity is a beautiful thing. We're in touch with God all the time, but you're still going to get sick. We live in a broken world. You're still going to expect spiritual sickness. I got it out. Expect spiritual sickness. It's still going to happen in this broken world. So don't go and like put these things in your shoeboxes and think, I am invincible, because you're not. You're going to get sick. You're going to fall. You're going to make mistakes. So you have to be prepared to go ahead and take that spiritual medicine. Uncover your wounds to your spiritual physician. Go to your confessor and take your spiritual medicine. Fast in the way that he gives you. Confess and then follow his advice. I don't want to use the word penance because that's kind of a fuzzy little thing. But we have to be prepared for those kinds of moments because they will come, okay? All right, so here's the one that's the hardest one, but also the easiest one. We talked about prayer. We talked about fasting and confession. Let's talk about almsgiving. Almsgiving is pretty easy, right? Like you give money to people. I go and write a church check. I go ahead and I do that. I buy tickets to the bazaar. I do these things. I am giving alms. Almsgiving is actually kind of a fuzzy thing, right? Here's the thing. We live in a world that loves to watch what other people are doing. When we go and we give things, because we're used to people watching us all the time, we want to advertise that we gave them. Every time you see something on Facebook about like, guys, did you know about this latest problem? There are dogs who are illiterate. Are you reading to dogs lately? If you're not reading to dogs lately, you're a bad person and hate puppies. But you see it, right? And we're like, I don't hate puppies. I read to a dog yesterday. I am not a puppy hater. I don't hate puppies. I like puppies. Because we live in this world, like, well, do you like puppies enough, though? Like I saw some posts of yours like a year ago, and maybe you don't like puppies enough. I think you might like cats. Right, cats. Now we're getting a whole nother ball of worms. So we live in this world where we're constantly trying to show our allegiances. We're trying to show our alliances. We're questioning the allegiances of other people. This is why almsgiving is so amazing in this time. So you guys have heard you should give so that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's in Matthew. Okay, why do we do that? Like we know we should give. Like, oh, there are hungry people, they need food. But why should we give them food without like waiting to like make a Facebook profile, like screen telling people like, I give food to hungry people. Why do we need to do that? Well, we do that because of detachment. Detachment is one of the really important things. That's another way of which we are turning towards God rather than looking at our own self. When we turn towards God, we take ourselves away from the navel gazing. Every opportunity to experience detachment is an opportunity to stop looking at ourselves. You're never going to see the world around you if you're constantly staring at your own navel. And it's really easy because it's right there. Our selves, all our needs, everything that we want is right here in front of us. And our ability to see where that goes and what that's doing it's hard. It's hard. It's really difficult to turn towards God in these moments. So almsgiving is this opportunity to experience detachment. We can serve the people of God, which is always a good thing, but it's always an opportunity to deny ourselves a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example because I like to teach with stories. Everything that you have is God's. We know this. All the things of the world, all of creation belongs to God. So when you give alms, you're actually not so much you bestowing your benevolence on somebody. You're sharing the wealth of God. something that God has given to you and that he means you to share. So it was really funny. I almost brought it today. But in my little gift bag from the Lovely, Lovely Connect people, there's a little glass bottle of Coke, which is like my favorite thing in the world. Like, I don't know, did you guys see that on Instagram or something? Because I talked about, it's like, I freaking love Coca-Cola. It's like so bad for you, but it's so good. But I grew up in a Mexican household, and it's like my grandmother would get like her prayers answered. She just would go, and she'd take a little bottle of Mexican Coke, and she'd give it to Santo Niño to say, here, baby Jesus, thank you. I got my shoes, or whatever. Like, it's like right there. And she would, put this little bottle. So I love Coca-Cola. But I also know it's like straight sugar, right? I know this on one level, but it's like, yeah, but it's Coca-Cola. It's para el niño. It's for the Holy Child. It's for Jesus. I'm drinking Coke for Jesus. It's okay. But it totally happens. Anyone here who knows what the Mexican abuela is, like, yeah, he gets the Coca-Cola. So it's like a Mexican affliction, right? So I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and there's like not a lot of Mexicans, go figure, right? So sometimes it's really hard. So weirdly, the place I can get it is Tractor Supply. So I know, right? It's a Tractor Supply. So I'm like in there, I'm getting cow feed, I'm getting medicine for the dogs, like whatever I'm getting. I'm a Tractor every Thursday. I'm a Tractor every Thursday because I'm getting it'll be like cattle feed or all the crazy things that we need. I'll be in there getting like vaccinations for pigs and stuff because I'm a hillbilly. Remember this. So I was in there like a couple of weeks ago, and there was Coca-Cola. I'm like, oh, I don't need more sugar. But it's right there, and it's the good Coca-Cola. So I got myself a bottle of Coca-Cola, and I take it home, and I put it in the fridge because I'm going to save it for tomorrow because it's a whole 24 hours away. So then I'll have less sugar in my body now so I can have more sugar later. So I put it in the fridge. Well, one of my sons, Elijah, freaking loves Coca-Cola. So he sees it. It's like, I blame my dad. It's the genes. He can't help it, right? So Elijah comes to me and he's like, can I have some of your Coca-Cola? So I say, yeah, you know what? You can have some of my Coca-Cola. He's like, I won't drink it all because I know it's free. I'm like, yeah, okay. So he's opening it. Another brother comes in the kitchen. He's like, can I have some Coca-Cola? And I watched my son go, what are you going to do for me? This was my Coke. This was my Coca-Cola. It was my good Mexican Coca-Cola that I got at Tractor Supply. And Eli's like, no, what are you going to do for me? I was like, wait a second, guys. Whose Coca-Cola is this? And Eli looks at me and he's like, it's Mom's. You have to ask Mom. That is almsgiving. Almsgiving is where someone says to you, like, hey, can I have some of that Coca-Cola? And you say, yes, because it's Dad's. You can have some of Dad's Coca-Cola. Every time you give alms, it's because you are participating in the benevolence of God, which is a beautiful thing. Because, really, it's not coming from you. You may feel like it's coming from you, but it's not coming from you. And the more that you remember that this is all God's benevolence, that everything that you have is God's benevolence, the more you're turning towards God and the less you are looking at yourself. That's the closer that we get to theosis. And that's exactly everything that we're doing. Our whole goal in life is just to become transparent to the will of God. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. We have physical bodies, we have physical needs, we have emotions. We're not in control of our passions anymore because the world is broken. So our resistance to our passions is also broken. All these things exist in the world because they were created by God. And we need to not look at the creation and the things around us, but turn instead towards God. And sometimes that means giving your brother Coca-Cola, even when you don't want to give him Coca-Cola. So you'll hear sometimes people say, God is never outdone in generosity. Well, and that's true. He's not outdone in generosity. But we need to not think about almsgiving as this thing God, it's not like some one-up war where you're busy pouring out libations so that God will pour out even more. It's not because the things that we give away, we get back in equal measure. That's not what being outdone in generosity means. What it means is that all the generosity that's in the whole world is God's, and anything that you do is never going to be that good. Because last I checked, he sacrificed his son on the cross so that you didn't have to go to hell. And I don't think any of us has ever done anything like that. And I'm pretty sure that none of us ever will. There is literally no generous thing that you can do that will be as good as God's. And that doesn't mean that you don't do it. What it means is that it's another opportunity for detachment. All the generosity in the world is God's. Everything that you can see, touch, do, everything that's here is all God's. When you give something to someone else, and don't lord it over to them like, what are you going to do for me? You're participating in the generous act of God. And it's a really great thing. It's a wonderful thing so that you can go ahead and you can be present for another person. So a friend of mine from high school, I really, really like her. She's a really great person. She went to a different college. I stayed in state. I'm from Colorado, so I stayed in state. She went actually to Chicago. And she was so lonely. Teresa was so lonely for Colorado. She missed mountains. She missed, Chicago, I know, is a really windy city, and they think they get a lot of snow, but they don't really get much. So she was really missing, good Colorado snow and all these kinds of things. So one of her classmates said, I know what it's like. I come from a big family. Teresa was one of 9. This girl was also one of 9. She's like, why don't you come and spend the weekend at my house with my family? You can come home with me, and then you won't be lonely. So Teresa goes. She's really excited about it. So I get this email like, hey, I'm going to go see this friend. She's really, really nice. It's going to be fun. Well, when Teresa got there, this amazing, generous, loud, chaotic, wonderful, wonderful family was a family of 11 living in a double-wide trailer. And they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing. What's more is when they eat dinner, there was literally one chair. I'm not exaggerating here. And it was not like a comfy padded chair in the living room. They had one wooden kitchen chair, one, and they wanted her to sit in it. Even grandma was sitting on the floor. So she's kind of feeling weird about this because it's like, hey, guys. Because Teresa came from a comfortable family. She came from a comfortable middle-class family who could afford to send her out of state to school. These people were being enormously generous with her because all the goods of the world are God's, including the one wooden kitchen chair. That was a blessing that they were given by God, and they were sharing that with her. Almsgiving is sometimes not about being the person to say, here, sit in this chair. Sometimes almsgiving is about being the person who sits in the chair. Sometimes almsgiving is about receiving God's love. If we think about generosity as being God's love, God made all these things in the world out of his love. Everything he provides for us, he provides out of love. We have this building that we're in that's heated and cooled and has light and has running water. These are all the goods of God that he's given to us to enjoy in this moment. Sometimes people being generous with you means accepting that generosity because you're receiving the will of God. You're giving them an opportunity to be that conduit of God's love, to receive God's love from him, because it's all God's. So when I think about generosity, I have to remember that sometimes generosity looks different. What Teresa needed in that moment wasn't a car, a dorm room, a tuition that was paid by her parents. What she needed in that moment was just to know that she wasn't alone. And these people had one kitchen chair and a double-wide trailer. And that's not a lot, especially for a family of 11. But they were able to give her what she really needed. She needed to receive God's love. So when you think about almsgiving, almsgiving is a way of participating in the generosity of God, of turning over all things to God and letting him do with them as he wants, so that we can love other people and receive love because it's all God's love. Almsgiving helps us because it reminds us to be detached from our own needs and our own desires and our own wants and our concept of what we own and what people owe us, so that we can just participate in the love of God and receive his love in all the ways that he likes to be generous with us. Okay, so we've talked about fasting, we've talked about almsgiving, we've talked about prayer. So the one thing that I want to go ahead and close out with, because I have 17 minutes, I want to give a chance for Q&A. The last thing that's kind of wrapped up in this, but isn't specifically in those things, that big 3, is weekly liturgy. Everybody needs to go to weekly liturgy. Go to weekly liturgy. Don't miss it. There's a really important reason for this. I was talking about this with my kids, and because I've got kids your age. So I was talking about this with my kids. And one of my kids said to me, well, I think the most important thing that people can do is go to weekly liturgy. If they do nothing else, they need to go to weekly liturgy because it makes it harder to run away from the other things if you're there every week. And it's not just overbearing babas and yayas, getting in your face where were you? No, because that doesn't help. That doesn't help anybody, right? But it's because every week you go and you put yourself in the presence of people who come together to be in the presence of God, right? And the more that you go and be with those people, the more that you see yourself as being one of those people. You see yourself as belonging. Shame and fear and isolation are the hallmarks of the devil. Every time that you feel shame and fear and isolation, that you pull away from the holy things of God, that's a temptation from the devil. That's all there is to it. That's why you have to go and be present in the people of God. So you see yourself with the people of God. The places where heaven and earth come together are in the holy mysteries. Those are at church, guys. They're not at a bar on Saturday night. They're not like at the cutest brunch place in town on Sunday morning. They're in church. This is the place where God has established, has given us this gift of where heaven and earth can come together. And I like to think about this as being like spark plugs. So, spark plugs, for those of you who aren't gearheads, I've got kids who are gearheads. Spark plugs are really important. Measuring the distance between your spark plugs is critical because if you have them too close, you can short out your system. If they're just a little bit too far, then you reduce the strength of the current that jumps between it. If they're really far, you'll get nothing. Why do we even have spark plugs? Well, we have spark plugs so that the current can jump from one to the other, and in that process, ignite the air-fuel mixture. So think about this as the mysteries. These are the places where heaven and earth come together, and God wants you to be present so that his spark can move through this gap into you and light your world on fire. Why would you not go? How can you not go? If you want to have your world lit on fire, you've got to be right there. You've got to be in the right place so that the spark of God can jump that gap and light your world on fire. So it's not one of the things that's in that prayer, fasting, almsgiving thing, like all those cute little cards that they give you at church when they try to get you to donate money, which is good. But you need to be in that place. You need to be like a spark plug right there, waiting so that God can light your world on fire. The reason we're tempted to not go, that's all a temptation from the devil. Because he, in his own bitterness, wants to pull you away from God. Because the further away you get, the more that spark is reduced. Until finally, it can't jump the gap anymore. That's why you need to be right there, resisting that temptation to fear and isolation. Because when you don't, you allow yourself to be pulled away so that you can't get there. You're not going to be able to make that gap. You're not going to be able to jump over into that. So this is why weekly liturgy is so important. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Okay? So you need spiritual medicine, right? You need your prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. You need to be weekly liturgy so you're in the presence of God. And we need to do this, why? Because when you are profoundly spiritually sick, crawling your way to the hospital is a lot harder. And it's going to happen. We're always going to have those moments. There's always going to be that time in our life when we're sick. You need to be ready for it. And it sounds like I'm being really bitter, but I'm not being bitter. It's like it happens, right? There's a beautiful world out there, but there's also, it's broken. You need to be right there. You need to be taking care of yourself. You need to fill your spiritual medicine box so that when those trials come, you're ready for it. Thank you. Yes. So we're going to do questions.
10 minutes.
Yeah. So, there.
All right. Questions?
Oh, come on. Somebody's got to have like one question or a thought. What's your favorite color?
Well, I can start us out then. Oh, awesome. Good.
Which monastery? My husband's attached to St. Sergius and Hermit of Elam. It's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So, like, if you know anything about the Upper Peninsula, it's the part of Michigan not on the mitten. And if you look at, there's this little peninsula called the Keweenaw Peninsula that pokes out the top into the lake. So we're right there, like straight across from Thunder Bay, Canada. So St. Sergius and Hermit of Elam. Anything? Come on. Yeah.
So you recommend, doing the baby step approach. Is that correct to say?
Yes.
Maybe for praying, right? If I open my prayer book, right, the morning prayer seems a little overwhelming. Like if I'm not a consistent runner, like what are the baby steps would you recommend?
Okay.
Same thing with fasting,
Okay.
going on completely on a vegan diet, even though I haven't been, or not me
Right.
specifically, but like if someone hasn't been fasting for over like the past few years and they
Okay.
want to improve themselves, like what are the
So-
baby steps
No,
that are
I get
legal?
it. I get what you're talking about. So first thing I want to say is that I can talk about specifically things that have happened in my life. because I'm nobody's spiritual father. Like, that's above my pay grade. But when it comes to praying, I can tell you that, I don't know what prayer book you're using, but we have the Jordanville hymnal, or prayer book. I always call it hymnal. Well, I mean, we sang the tropars and whatever, but, so we have the Jordanville book, and it's got those 10 prayers in the morning, and it just seems like a lot. And we've got little kids. So what we do is we pray the morning prayer up to that point, and we've got those 10 prayers. We do whatever the number of the day is. So if it's the first of the month, we do the first, and the second, and so on. And then we start over again when we get to the 11th, and it works out really well. On a really, really bad day, like maybe people are sick or whatever, we just do the Trisagion. But it's at least something. We can at least come together in the morning. So some is better than none. Like, if you really can't do anything more, some is always better than none. Go as far as you can. I know that some of my older kids, they are in a carpool, and so they will say the morning prayer up to the point they get to the other people's house. And it's like, in the winter, you can do the whole thing because it's a long drive. But in the summer, it's shorter. And so I know that this is what's worked for us. You could talk about that with your priest. Insofar as fasting is concerned, I think that especially, and I do write and talk about fasting a great deal, I think the best place to start is just to do the Wednesdays and Fridays. And I think that it's easier to kind of do a cheese fair thing where you just move meat. You should always talk to your priest about that. But just removing meat's easier because you can accidentally go vegetarian. You can go and get some macaroni and cheese and, look, I didn't eat any meat. So it's an easier place to go because what's going to happen is even if you're just doing that cheese fair kind of fast where you're just giving up meat, you're still going to get to dinner and be like, oh, I hate dinner. I don't know what I'm going to eat. It still is a sacrifice, and you're still going to learn to grow a little bit. And eventually, it won't be a big deal. Like, if you didn't grow up fasting, I grew up Catholic, and so I'm like, that's fasting, guys. Macaroni and cheese is good. And then I remember my husband was like, no, not even macaroni. I was horrified. I was like, this is the worst bait and switch. Are you kidding me? Like, what? It was really, really hard for me. So it's really kind of funny because I actually went to our priest and cried about it. I'm like, he doesn't want us to eat cheese during Lent. The doctor's like, yeah, or well, not doctor. They're just like, "Rah." And I remember thinking, you guys are bad people. Like, what's wrong with you? But it's true. It's a really good place to go. It's to start right there, because you'll get there. But you just have to commit. Like, next fast, we're also going to give up eggs or whatever. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Thanks again for your talk. I'm thinking about the point you made earlier about discipline versus pride and that tension that can happen sometimes. Like, if you are keeping up with the fast or if you are keeping up with prayers, but then you're not moving towards Christ, but you're maintaining some level of self-righteousness.
Yeah.
If you could talk about that. I know you said this above your pay grade, and some things could be spiritual fathers.
I do have to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
But I think we can all see that in our lives at moments when we've been like that. Because we look at people like, oh my gosh, they're so bad at this. I should teach them how to make everything better. Like, I should do this. But it's really the hardest thing, I think, especially if there's something that, like, if you're always really good at getting your prayer rule done, whatever your prayer rule is, like, I say 500 Jesus prayers before I drink coffee every morning. Like, it's really easy to look at someone else and think that they're not good. But when I find myself in those moments, I can't even remember where it came from. Maybe someone can, like, jump in if they remember. But maybe you've heard that story about the monk at a monastery who was a drunkard and it was an embarrassment and everybody was so mad. But secretly he was constantly cutting back. Here's the thing, is that we need to remember that that's actually us. We're actually that. It's when we think about the story, we're like, I should be patient with those people. What we need to realize is, actually, I'm not embarrassment. We have to remember that that's us. Because what you can see isn't the same thing as what God sees. And it can be really, really, really hard. So, I like to think of it this way. I actually should have, if I'd had like all the time in the world, I would have talked about it. I'm a really big fan of St. John the Short. He's like my guy. And I love his story. So he's the one who had to go out into the desert, and the Abba Father made him water that stick. And he had to water that stick, and it was long, and it was hard. And like, it would be really easy to be like, guys, I'm watering my stick. Are you watering your stick? Like, it's really easy to think about that. But the most important thing that we can remember about our prayer and fasting, especially when it's really easy to feel prideful, is that you're the stick you're watering. You're the stick. we think that it's all about obedience, and it is. But in the end, what stick are you watering with those things? You're the dead stick. And the goal is to water yourself and water yourself enough that you come to life. And how long you have to water that stick depends on who you are. So what you have to remember is like, well, maybe their watering schedule is different than mine. And it's hard. It's really hard. Because like I see this a lot with people. I've had people like at church dinners like, you should tell her to not bring egg salad anymore. Did you tell her? Like, no. I am not going to tell her that. But it's hard. It's really hard because we see ourselves. But we have to remember, is like, you know what? It's not my job to water her stick. It's not my job to water anybody else's stick. I have to water my stick because the stick that I'm watering is mine. It's me. I am trying to bring life to my own soul. And it's hard. It's hard. I do it all the time. Like, I know that feeling is like you're looking at somebody like, oh, they're so stupid. They need me so much. Yeah. It's like, but it's really easy to do. So it's really important that we remember, like, I need to water my stick more, and use that as an opportunity to water our own stick. Is there anything else?
Hello? Ooh.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to do a little comment on the just baby steps. My daily routine I would describe as nothing short of a dumpster fire most days, and I've talked to my priest about it, and like I feel bad I can't spend 15 minutes in the morning praying or something, and he just told me the Jesus prayer once in front of the icon before you go out the door. That's it. If you can do more, that's great. But that was like just, you can't spend 3 seconds saying the Jesus prayer one time in front of an icon. I mean, pretty bare minimum, and just as a building point. That helped me, so I thought I would share.
Well, because some is always better than none.
Exactly.
Some is always better than none. So anybody who's out here like, I suck. Like, wow, guys, I suck. Some is always better than none. So just do the little thing that you can right now. Not that you can't do more later, but like sometimes that feeling of like, I'm not doing anything at all is overwhelming. So do the tiniest bit of thing, because that's a movement. Oh, sorry.
You said that you, as a child, grew up Catholic,
Yes.
and now you're Orthodox. Can you just kind of go through that change for you and like what it was like going
Like
from-
actually what that's forever. We should probably talk.
Yeah.
That took a long time because it was like I grew up Catholic, right? And so like the Pope is everything. Like we had a picture of the Pope in the dining room. It's like I know Orthodox people are like, that's really weird. I mean, like, but that's a complicated thing. Pope Honorius. So anyone who doesn't have time to talk to me, look up Pope Honorius, because the first time like a Catholic, I was in a Catholic dialogue with somebody, and an Orthodox person's like, hey, look up Pope Honorius. Like, someone thought, oh, I'm done. I know where it is now. What were you going to say?
I was just going to build on your comment. I spoke to, when I was starting kind of the journey here, I used to beat myself up because I was like, I'm not formally praying or whatever, and the priest at the time was basically saying, look, you don't have to be in a formal place or in front of icons to pray. Pray in your car. Like, on your way to work, just say the Jesus prayer all that way and start building. Same thing with fasting. Like, if you fall one day, get up, and keep going. There was a story of a monk that they asked him, what do you do all day? And the monk was, I fall and I stand up and I keep going. I fall, I stand up and I keep going. So that's kind of how I see the journey. You're going to fall. Regardless of whatever you do, even if you're perfect, you're going to fall. Just stand up and keep going.
The important part is the getting up. Yeah. There was somebody else over here.
So you just mentioned like everyone has to kind of care about himself and water his own stick. How about within the family? Like say the husband and wife, for instance, everyone, like in spiritual life, should be completely independent, and they have their own kind of
Well, I think sometimes
rules
that
with
happens,
their father confession, or there's something.
Well, so here's the thing. Again, like I'm nobody's confessor, but because my husband is clergy, one of the things that our dean thinks is really important is that the husband and wife have the same confessor, because you guys come up in each other's confessions. Like, shocker, it's gonna happen. Right? So that helps keep you on the same page. I think it's really important to do that, to remember that, like, we don't live our spiritual lives in isolation from other people. We live them with other people. We live them with our families. And so I think it's really important to, like, so here's the thing. People have different wake-up times in my family. So for my husband, evening prayer is sacrosanct. If you want to go with somebody, great. You want to go out, that's fine. Everybody has to come to our house and say Vespers first. Like, I don't care who you are. And it's really kind of interesting because I've noticed that other kids just like take it as a given. I was like, well, we got to go do this. So there's times when my kids do things with other people and like, yeah, but you just need to know that you have to go to their house first because we're gonna do Vespers. And that sounds like a really weird thing to do, but just coming together every day in that moment has been really, really good for us. And another thing is that like if you come to my house, hunger is the best sauce. Like I make one dinner. If you don't fast, I don't really care. Like, I don't care. This is what I'm making for dinner. You can eat it or not. I'm not going to worry about it. But this is what we eat. And so there are kids who come over and like, well, I'd like to come over and play today, but I want to know if today's a meat day or a bean day. And then there's this one little kid, he's like, you know what? I'll come over even if it's a bean day. But it's one of those things that, so you live it together as a family, but you can also like, I find that we bring people in. And it works. It works. They should see us that this is just as natural as breathing. It's a bean day. Come over. We're breathing together. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, but I hope it did.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much again for being here and sharing that wisdom with us. We've got about 15 minutes before the next session starts. Mingle amongst yourselves, all of that. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.